All right. We'll go ahead and start our presentation. I am Jessica Ray. I am the Chief Business Strategist here at Headway. I've been working with Wes for many, many years, and I'll just say I'm the one who likes to put his brain on paper. That way everyone knows um, his methodology, his way of thinking. So I'm here to help share his insights along the way. But Wes, I will ask you if you could please click to the next slide. Um, Outside of the session being recorded, do know that there's going to be some questions along the way, some little polls. So please interact. They're just a way to get you engaged and talking. All right. So, Wesley, Wes is the founder of and CEO of Headway Idea Labs and the CEO of QBio Innovation Hub. That's in Houston. It's a life sciences accelerator and wet lab facility supporting medtech and healthcare founders. With over 30 years of global experience in business development, product commercialization, and market expansion, Wesley has supported technology-driven companies across Asia, Europe, South America, and North America. He's been helping scale solutions across more than 10 industries, including regulated markets such as healthcare and life sciences. At Headway, he developed a structured investor readiness and seed conversion framework designed to bridge the gap between technical progress and capital discipline. Over the past 12 plus years, the curriculum has influenced more than 500 startups across the ecosystems. Approximately 80% of the founders who complete the structured program go into the raise capital, with early institutional checks typically ranging from 150,000 to over $1 million. Wesley serves on the Texas Medical Center Steering Committee and advises the TMC Biodesign Accelerator, focusing on structured commercialization and capital readiness. His work centers on one principle: transforming founders into investor strategic leaders capable of disciplined execution, milestone based capital planning, and sustainable scaling. So today we're going to go from pre-evaluation to Investible, the complete journey, and how accelerators standardize investor readiness across every cohort. Wes, I'll let you take it away and share today's agenda and go right into it.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Jessica, and welcome to everyone that has joined this webinar. I am excited to share the topic today, which is from pre-evaluation to investable. I call it the complete journey because over the past 13 years in the startup ecosystem, I've been able to study the gaps and those situations that typically cause startups to fail, but then also watching the frustration of a lot of accelerators, incubators, innovation hubs, and even investors that run these cohorts. So just so you know, we've been partnering with VCs. Every VC I've met over the past 30 days has partnered with us. And so I'm having these one-on-one conversations. And the reason being is they understand what we are trying to address in regards to helping these founders solve their problem early on. And it's not just the product, but it's other things that are extremely important. Now, I'm very passionate about accelerators because when I first started, I was an incubator, then turned into an accelerator. And then we run our own accelerator here at QBio, which again, as Jessica mentioned, is in the life sciences. So both biotech, medtech, and in multiple different detailed, so to speak, industries. My background is in tech, and I realized that something like this needed to be put together many, many years ago when I was in corporate. And the reason being, I was launching new products, and I realized the company I worked for, one of the last companies I worked for, was purchased by Teledyne. But we were launching products that didn't really have a clear market strategy. So the engineering team and the company was pouring tons of money into a product they felt was actually solving a problem. And that's not exactly like a startup, but it was, in a sense, a startup within a larger organization. And there are many, many, many examples like that. But today, what I want to focus on is first of all, is the methodology, the thinking that I want to impress upon you or for you to consider as you're running your own accelerator, innovation hub, or incubator. I will talk a little bit about our platform, but that's not the goal today. I'm not here to sell you the platform. I'm more here to help hopefully get your mind to thinking on what you could do differently in the organization you are in now. So some of the things I'll say, maybe because I'm an engineer, are kind of blunt, but not only that, I'm very passionate about the startups, not just the accelerators, because I've seen a lot of these startups spend a lot of time and money and energy and frustration. So I want to make sure they get as much as possible from your services, right? So accelerators and incubators typically graduate startups, but investors fund readiness, and we'll dive a little bit into what that means. Um, because I've been a part of a lot of accelerator programs and as a mentor, as a judge, throughout every year, throughout the year, I'm constantly being involved in these. And I see accelerators graduate, but then a very small percentage of startups actually be ready for funding. And currently, graduation, in my opinion, doesn't always mean investable, right? But startups jump into these programs thinking that this is the next step, and after I'm done, I'm going to be investable. Pitch decks don't always reduce investor risk. They might be nicely put together, but that doesn't mean that you've reduced the risk that the investors are going to encounter. Investor readiness is preparation, right? It's not presentation. It's preparation. It's convincing the investors that I understand fully the risks at hand. And because I'm asking you to invest money, right? I always tell startups, this is not a loan. It's not a gift. You know, unless you've done something really, really bad, the investors can't get their money back. So it's much more than presentation, it's preparation. And then standardization creates predictable cohort outcomes. And I'll jump into that towards the end of this. A lot of the outcomes I've seen, and maybe you're not one of them, but most of the outcomes I've seen with accelerators and incubators is many accelerators create pitch-ready founders, but they're not always investable, right? And that's the key thing. Investor conversion is the real KPI for most accelerators. And depending on how accelerators are funded, their business models are different, their KPIs are different. But you know, we always have to look back to what are the expectations of the startups that are coming into your program, and are you really addressing those concerns or those hopes or those dreams that they have, right? Because they have a goal at the end of your accelerator program or your incubation program that they want to meet. And then a system is needed. A system, a structure, a standardization is so to speak, is needed to raise founder readiness before founders hit demo day. And there are a lot of stories that I can tell regarding this, but I won't get into them today. So investor readiness comes down to three things. This is, now, you could be more, but for me, what I've seen, these are the three top things that stand out, right? Team. Is the team aligned, coachable, self-aware? You'd be surprised how many, and you guys, if you speak to a lot of investors like I do all the time, the minute they realize that this team or the founder is not self-aware, it's a done deal. They don't care how well the product is and what they've done regarding their business model. They don't care if the founder is not self-aware. They're concerned that that team or that founder is going to drive things and into the ground and make bad decisions. The second thing is business model. Is it scalable? And have they thought through how they're going to scale? It's not just numbers and markets, it's how they're going to intentionally grow their business. What is their go-to-market strategy? And some of the largest accelerators that I'm a part of. I mean, one of them is the largest in the world. And this is the consistent problem I address every time I go, because they bring in, I'm heading there in April again this year, and this year they're bringing in about 500 people, but 180 startups. But over the years, I've mentioned to them, this is where your startups are falling short. It's not just that they have a business model, but they don't have a very strong go-to-market strategy, which will support your business model, right? And so there are other components that are a little bit more important to support these three things that a lot of times aren't always addressed as deep as they need to be. And the founders need that. They really, really do need that. And then product, validation solution to a real pain. A lot of times, and this is not more than the others, but a lot of times products are built and it's not solving a real pain, or it's solving a symptom of a bigger pain is what I've seen. And so when that symptom of a bigger pain goes away, their whole product dies and goes out, or people don't adapt to it or adopt it as quickly or significantly as they'd hope. Now, investors are very optimistic and not turned off when founders focus on these three things, right? Investors are very optimistic. They're not turned off. They're like, oh, there's some hope. Even if they know they have to jump in there and do work, they're excited because of the way they're able to work and engage with the founder. So the reason why I mention this, because we'll talk more about it, but this is key, the key focus that you must do or focus on with the founders is the team. And it's not just skill, it's not just experience. Those things are very, very important. They need to be a right build of a team, but I want you to think a little bit deeper on what I'm going to talk about in regards to the team. They have to see something in the team that they like. These three pillars are real scoring and measurable criteria, right? These are the three pillars that I look at and say, okay, based on the level of detail and the level of effort and understanding and depth that the teams, the startups have dug in, will actually show measurably to the investor, okay, this is a potentially worthy risk. Now, accelerators having a modular system builds these pillars sequentially and repeatably, right? And I'll talk more about a modular system, because most accelerators are doing a great job, right? They are doing a fantastic job providing some steps and guidance and mentorship and influence on startups and founders that lack. And you find different startups that come in with different strengths and then different weaknesses and multiple gaps. And so accelerators and incubator hubs really help to address all of that. But it's still very, very, very difficult, right? So Headway's investor readiness methodology: complete the founder transformation journey. Complete the founder transformation journey. And I want you to think about that. The founder there needs to be a transformation in the way they think, act, and execute. It's not just a great visionary that has created an incredible idea or a product out of an incredible idea. I need to really work on how I'm going to transform that founder, because that's the number one thing. That's very, very key. And this is the way we think through what we do. Modular and standardized across cohorts. When we look at this, we know that every startup comes with different strengths, different weaknesses, different gaps, longer longevity in a particular industry and maybe than others. And so having a modular mindset when you're bringing these startups in, it means that not everybody's on the same playing field. And how can I modulize my platform or my process or my programming to ensure those gaps are filled and a startup gets what they need and not too much? Because time is always of the essence for these startup founders. And then 3, designed for founder clarity and transformation. Okay, basic thing to me, it means, do they understand why? Do they understand why this is being done? What effects it has? why an investor is going to like this or not like this. Understanding the why of everything they do is going to provide founder clarity and transformation. People don't change and people don't execute if they don't thoroughly understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And it's very important that when you're teaching and walking these startup founders through a particular program, that it's not just information and homework they need to do. They got to understand the depth of why and its importance and how it's going to transform themselves, but then also their team, and how it's going to transform their market and the world. They need to understand why, because when they do, they can speak intelligently to the investors. But not only that, something very, very important takes place is they become very strategic thinkers, and they start thinking outside of just the box of my product and all the features it's going to have and all the customers it may potentially save. They start thinking strategically on how they're going to navigate through a very challenging business environment. It's very, very important. Last methodology, key pillar methodology that Headway addresses or looks into in regards to investor readiness is receiving measurable outputs at every stage. What does that look like? How can I measure at every stage that the founders have reached or understood or achieved a certain level or phase or stage that I expected them to? But a lot of times these things are rushed in 3 months. Some accelerators, specifically in the life sciences, go a little longer. I run one for QBio. I go 6 months. We finished our last cohort in October last year. We had 4 come in. One was very, very early. The second one got funded in December, and I have 2 now with 2 VCs that are interested in the remaining 2. But measurable outputs are very, very important at every stage because you want to ensure your founders are actually retaining and understanding what they're learning and what they're diving into. That's very, very key, because if not, when they meet an investor and the investor asks some of these questions, they can tell right off the bat, yeah, they have a surface understanding of what they learned, but they don't understand the importance. They don't understand the why. They're not fully comprehending everything they really need to know. And these things are very critical for a company to survive, right? So measurable outputs is very, very important to see how your startups are actually growing along their journey in your incubator or accelerator. Jessica, you wanted to ask a question here, I guess?
Yes. So here's a little poll for everyone. What percentage, and this is a quiz, percentage of startup failures are linked to team problems? We talked about teams. We're going to go deeper into teams, but this can go into alignment, coachability, leadership gaps. I'm going to launch the poll right now for you to take a guess. So you should see it on your screen, and we'll tell you the answer in just a bit, but we want to get a feel for what people think. And this is off of the CB Business Journal of top 20 reasons why startups fail. So I'll just give you a hint that team was part of the top 3 reasons, but what percentage is that? All right, we're going to give it a few more minutes. Not minutes, but seconds. Okay. And all right. So many of you answered 46%, but the answer is 23%. So 23% of startups that fail is linked to team problems. So now you know.
Cool beans. Thank you. Thank you for that. So purpose, leadership, and market advantage. I'm going to go through 9 key things that you want to consider implementing into your cohort. The first one I call is igniting strategic purpose. And so think of the word ignite and strategic and yet purpose. A lot of visionaries or founders are visionaries, right? They're very passionate about what they're doing and what they're building. But besides that, there needs to be strategy. So look at it from this perspective. Strategy must meet that visionary, and that needs to create something brand new. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where the why is clarified for the founder, and it becomes what I call their operational compass for decisions and execution. And now they begin to navigate their business from a strategic perspective, but then also very purposeful. And a lot of times they're making decisions based on purpose, which typically stems from a passion and emotion. But now you need to bring in the strategic side of that decision-making process. Now, what does this do? Over the course of the past 12, 13 years, I've seen it build strategic core within the company, right? Vision, mission, and values. I help these startups utilize those three components. Obviously, the product, which is the pain it's solving, but it creates a strategic core in how they make decisions for the company. When to go left, when to go right, when to stop, when to move forward, right? And that's very, very critical. But having that in the beginning is going to do a lot for the startup. Secondly, is team intelligence and leadership self-awareness, right? So this is where we help startups understand their blind spots. And their blind spots are typically areas, and everyone has them. Everyone has them. You probably have them. These are areas where your family members or friends, people close to you go, do you know you always do that? This is a problem you always do, and you don't realize it. You deny it, and you go, oh, no, you don't understand me, and da-da-da-da. But this is something emotional with everyone that shows up in a situation, either negative or overly positive, but it causes them to make bad decisions. And investors when they sit down and they're talking to the founding team and they realize, well, these guys don't know where their blind spots are. They're not really on target with their weaknesses. They don't really know their strengths. But the blind spots is what they call self-awareness. And so teaching or unearthing that from your founders is extremely important. It's going to determine, are they going to be successful through the rest of this cohort or not? And I'm sure all of you have run into them where you're giving them good advice and everyone's telling them the same thing, but they're not listening. But this is very, very important because these first two steps are the beginning steps of transformation of this founder to think differently, be differently, execute differently. And then deciding a scalable market advantage. And this is where I call it leverage, or it calls it advantage. This is where I call, in some of my notes, I call it the fingerprint. I call it the 360-degree fingerprint. But every company outside of product features, right? Product features, product price, branding needs to have something that leverages them above the rest. So this is where we translate the company's mission, values, and product, and also their vision into positioning, differentiation, and competitive advantage, right? So this is where we teach them not only to rely on their product, but what are some other internal values that they hold dearly to them that is going to help them be competitive? So for the US, you have Chick-fil-A, we have Deloitte, we have many other companies. Costco's one, Southwest Airlines used to be one. There are many, many companies out there that have used this methodology to be extremely competitive. Their product is almost the same as everybody else's, but they didn't rely on brand or price or features to gain customer adoption. And there's actually a survey done globally out of 600,000 people where it says 91% or so of people will move from one company to another, and they'll move to the second company because the second company has a different set of components that leverages them against their competition. And it's based on using their mission, values, product, but then also their vision as well. But teaching the founders and the team and the startups how to think this way and leverage their competitive advantage on things they already possess. Now they become a little bit more strategic, right? And again, this is very, very important. So the first three stages we look at is purpose, leadership, and market advantage. How do you train your startups to think along those lines without just quickly jumping into the business aspects of, go check the market, quantity, how much you can sell, and your competition, and all this. And most startups, I'm sure you run into this. They'll tell you, "Oh, I don't think there's that much competition," and you jump on Google very quickly, and Google says, "Oh, there's 5 companies," and they get very depressed. Competition is good, don't worry, but how are you going to make sure you stand apart? And don't look at it at just branding, features, and price, right? The next three is what I call product validation, evidence, and financial trust. So now that you've gotten the leadership part, the strategic part in regards to the founder and the team having a transformation of mindset and strategy and purpose and making sure they all fit together. The next three we look at is the product validation, right? And so translating vision into validated product solutions, which converts the founder intuition into feasibility-backed product solutions and prototypes. Very, very important, right? They have a vision. And I'll give you a very quick story as I'm watching the time here. I had a company come to me, a startup, and she developed this app. It was for Africa based, and she did a really good job. And so she saw an increase in downloads, but then it stopped. Anyway, she came to me. She wanted to do a market study or so on and so forth. But I had her do her vision statement. And I had to write it out, and I can explain what that looks like, but it's a story. It's a 2-page story I have them do. And I sent it to the developers because she needed new developers. The developers came back. They fully understood the whole picture of what she was trying to develop and came up with new ideas on how to build this product to be even much more competitive than it already was. And so we're looking at the founder's vision and teaching people, okay, from your vision, are you developing a product that actually aligns with that vision? And I can't go into the details on why that is so important, but it is, because a lot of times people have a clear vision, and when they write out that vision and it's clear on what the impact they're trying to make, a lot of times they build a product that is opposite of what their initial vision was. So that's very important. And then evidence-driven market validation. It moves founders from hypothesis to proof through customer discovery and early adopter engagement. So I'm not sure if your accelerator does not have a rigorous workshop or plan on helping your startups understand what an early adopter is and is engaging with early adopters pretty aggressively, then there's going to be a high likelihood of launch failure. And so this is extremely important. And the early adopters are not too difficult to find. They're pretty easy to engage with once they're found. But this is very, very critical because early adopters are typically as passionate as the founders to solve the problem. They're not looking to solve the problem themselves, but they know the market, they know the people that need it. And they're also influencers and decision makers. So early adopters must be connected. If you haven't brought that into your cohort, please do so. It will change product launch and adoption from 0 to 100 in an amazing way. And then financial thinking for investor trust. This is where we help the founders develop pricing, competitive pricing, margins, revenue models that prove commercial viability. Part of my background was, as I mentioned, was in business development. I think I did mention that, and sales. And so, plus I got training in negotiations understanding the longevity of a customer and where to begin and where to end and when to interject for a new product or more products or whatever. But understanding how margins work in regards to sales cycles, in regards to the competition, all of that is very, very important because they need to, again, think strategically on how they're going to launch a product. And it's not always very simple, right? Some situations are, especially if they don't have many competitors or their product is what we call transformational or incremental. That may be the case, but in most cases, it's going to be a challenge launching. So having them understand the financial thought process, and it's not just price. They need a full understanding of how financially they're going to sell, gain revenue, profit margin, scalability, all of that, and overhead, right? And that definitely helps with the investor trust with that startup. And some of these results moves from belief to proof. This is where accelerators build investable evidence, right? And that's very important. Now you're beginning to build investable evidence in these startups. And investors want traction logic, all the investors I met with in the past 3 weeks, again, there's about 20 of them, all came on board. It's funny, there's probably 10% that actually were interested in traction. The majority of them were interested in companies that hadn't gained traction, which is interesting. But they need to make sure the traction logic, there's a good, solid plan behind that company gaining traction in customers. Investors want financial clarity, not just a prototype, right? They need to understand, okay, how is this going to sell, profit margins, so on and so forth, and how you're going to gain market share. And then the last three here, things that are the methodology, the key things that we look at is strategic sales and market expansion partnerships, right? And this is what I call as part of their go-to-market strategy. And this builds scalable distribution strategy beyond founder-led selling. And this is what one of the things, not many things, but one of the things I was really, really good at in corporate was building these when I'm launching a new product, understanding what partnerships that I'm not paying for are going to get me into the market, get my new product exposure and adoption. And so this is very, very key. I call this part of the go-to-market strategy, but this is very key for investors to see. But it's also for them to see it, the startups need to fully understand the importance of it and how to design it, right? But it removes a huge amount of burden from the startup trying to go around and selling their product in the earlier stages. And then this is a unique one, which I would say all the investor VCs that I've spoken to like this, and this is something that is unique to Headway, and that's because not totally unique, but I have a strategy behind the global market entry with investor clarity, right? And this is where I look at different demographics for a company in the world where they could gain traction, support, whether they need grants or there's specific governmental grants that would support what they're doing early on, or investors, right? And maybe they need validation, especially if they're in the life sciences. There's clinical trial sites, or there's a patient population that will solve their problem. And it doesn't mean that they need to sell all over the world. But the four things I have them do, and it's a good, solid exercise, I have them look at these four things. I have them go around the globe and tell me what part of the world would your product do well in based on the economic ecosystem, social ecosystem, cultural ecosystem, because some things aren't always culturally acceptable or socially acceptable, and governmental, right? And that has, governmental, either political, governmental, the two go together. But I says, look at those four key components and tell me where your product may potentially have the opportunity for validation and traction, and then potentially financial support. Now, when they do that, 99% of the companies come back and go, hey, Wes, I found one country or one continent. And then, looking at number 7, now they build partnerships that are going to help them get in there. And there's a discussion I'm having right now with one of our startups here. They raised about $40 million in our building here, and helping them gain access to other continents. But looking at these 4 components, I'm lowering my voice because they're not too far from me, but it's helping them gain access, and they've already gone into 2 major countries in the world, and they're trying to get into a continent now. But putting this on the mind of a founder and helping them strategically look at this and figure out how they can navigate this global market entry is very, very crucial, not just for the investor, but for them in the way they think and the way they execute. And then lastly, the fundable story, investor pitch mastery, which integrates strategy, which is key. They want to hear this person's strategic, validation, traction, financial logic, risk mitigation. That's a big thing. Again, this is not free money. I always have to tell the startups, this is not free money. It's not a loan. It's money that the investors are going to risk. So they need to see a lot of that risk mitigation into a compelling investor narrative. And now they know the startup has done its due diligence. And it gives them so much more confidence. But not only that, the company that we finished the cohort in October and got funded in December, the co-founder, who's a medical doctor in one of our cancer hospitals, he came to me and he says, Wes, I fully understand and I'm confident on how to tell our story to investors. And he felt that through our program, we weren't focused on getting the deck to have the right information. We're more focused on the transformation of them as a team and how they think from a strategic perspective. And in my opinion, doctors and are some of the hardest entrepreneurs because they've got big brains. And PhD scientists are, but it was really good to hear him say that. And the results, it creates scalable growth and fundable narrative. Pitch comes last because it must be built on evidence, right? They're not just pitching. They can back up everything they say with knowledge and understanding and clarity. This is what improves demo day conversion rates. Okay, I'm going to be finished here. So the journey, pre-evaluation to investor readiness, the Investible cohort. Pre-evaluation is what we do is we do a few things. Headway has it's a business analyzer. So it goes through a person uploads their pitch deck, but it analyzes their pitch deck, but also their business model, which is very, very key, and also their team. But a pre-evaluation process is very important. And we also offer pre-accelerators. And so you could do your own pre-accelerator. But a lot of you that have a lot of applicants, I would suggest a pre-accelerator, pre-evaluation process and it's not, I hate to say this because I want all startups to succeed, but it weeds out those, it removes those that are not ready. And it's never good to bring in a startup that is not ready. It's not good for anyone, not good for the people training, not good for the startup, because at the end of the 3-6 month year, they end up failing anyway, and they've wasted a lot of that time. Now, they may gain some stuff, gain some knowledge, but it's not good for them. And so having a program that is pre-acceleration or pre-evaluation validation, I think is very important. And we're running some of that right now for some of the startups that are coming into our accelerator program. That investor readiness, a modular transformation system, and I will touch on that, where you bring in the right components at the right time so that every founder gets what they need. And this is going to help with an investable output, traction, model clarity, and an investor narrative. Do you want to ask this question?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what percentage, and this is for everyone, this is anonymous, but you could answer for us, that'd be great. What percentage of your startups become investable after they complete your program? So let's put the poll up for you so you could answer. I'm curious to learn if you're able to. And this is just for us to learn more about our audience and what percent of your startups become investable. So we'll give it a couple more seconds. All right. We have a good number of you answering. Okay. And I know it's going to be scattered in terms of responses, but thank you for that. Let's see. All right. Should show the results, maybe, but we will. Let's see if, here we go. I don't know if, can y'all see results on your end? This one's a new format that I tested out, but thank you for answering. So the reason why we're asking this is because we want to know if there's a way we can improve this. There's a lot of different techniques in how you could improve your startups to be invested, whether it's within a year after your program, maybe 3 years. But as Wes mentioned, we have been testing out this accelerator program, or actually a pre-evaluation, to better to weed out the ones that aren't ready to come into your cohort yet. So, Wes, you did explain a little bit about it, but want to share a little bit more on what that pre-accelerator looks like for us?
You want me to share more, or?
Yeah, if you want.
Well, I guess it's for us. I suggest people take 2 months to 3 months to go through it. It's self-paced, and it has videos, it has worksheets that are fillable. They're PDFs online that step through the process of telling them. So every worksheet I give, it says why. So I hand wrote all of these. There are about 30 to 40 of them over the past 13 years, and I update them 2 to 3 times a year. But they explain why this is important, the purpose behind everything, and the strategic questions so that they begin to understand why they're doing this, the importance of why they're doing this. It actually gives them a better knowledge of what they're trying to accomplish and how to explain it and how to use it for future strategic decisions. So it's teaching them, it's transforming them to be strategic thinkers. That's the goal behind all of this. But it's self-paced, and so they can run through it on their own without any facilitator or engagement from a mentor. So I'm going to go through the next several slides very quickly because of time. The pre-evaluation, improving cohort quality before day one. I kind of mentioned this. Pre-accelerator brings business model clarity. If you have one, consider that, and you can put one together. Ideal customer fit. Business model clarity for the founder. Ideal customer fit helps them address their ideal customer. I think it's good for them to come in, and they've done some work behind that already. Financial health and funding, what that looks like for them, and team strength. If they can, from what I've seen, if they are solid on these 5 things, or at least 3/4 of the way there, before they're coming into your cohort, they're going to do a lot better. They're going to do a lot better. You're going to see them go through your accelerated program, and they're going to be able to keep on track with everything they're learning. It is a risk when you bring in startups that it's only one person, as I've seen over the past 13 years, because that startup is going to want you to be their co-founder, and that's going to be very difficult because you can't be their co-founder. The minute they step in front of investors, unless it's an angel investor that wants to partner, it's almost a no-go. And then the results from having a pre-accelerator, and again, I'm encouraging you to have one. And those, I would set one up. If you haven't, you could set one up that just runs and has people go through a whole bunch of steps. This evaluation reduces subjectivity and founder charisma bias. It sets entry requirements and reduces mid-program drop-off, which you'll see a lot of people, you can tell when they get to a certain point, and I say their brain is full, and that's because they haven't understood what they've already started learning, and they're dropping off because it's too much for them, and they just feel that they're sinking. And then strong intake gate gives you a strong cohort. Now, I mentioned structured and standardization. This is why the Headway methodology works. So it's not just my opinion and the opinion of all the investors we've been working with and all the startups and all the business professionals we've been working with over the past 13 years. You know, early stage companies often romanticize flexibility, right? They do. I'm reading some of my notes here, but here's the reality. Chaos does not scale, structure does. Investors don't fund ideas. They fund repeatable execution, and repeatability requires standardization. And that's very key. Standardization does not mean bureaucracy, because I think a lot of times we hear that and we think, oh, corporate world. Well, I understand startup is totally different from the corporate world, but it does bring something in. It brings clear decision-making, defined milestones, documented processes, consistent communication systems, and capital planning discipline. These are areas that are very, very important, and standardization helps bring that into your cohort, but more so into your startups. You know, in other words, when everything depends on founder intuition or mentor experience, you have a human risk at hand, and that's dangerous, right? It just increases the amount of risk into the whole methodology. And structure. Every milestone structure is important, but structure is important for these startups. And again, there needs to be flexibility with the startup, but structure is important. For example, what milestones are we hitting? Why does it matter? What capital does it unlock, right? How does it get us to the next stage of investment? What does this do for us when you put in structure? From an investor's perspective, unstructured founder is unpredictable execution. Unpredictable execution is higher risk. Higher risk is lower valuation or no investment. And structure signals maturity, discipline, coachability, scalability. And this is what investors are looking for. So why do I believe in this type of methodology? Because it removes mentor lottery. And I was a mentor 13, 14 years ago at an accelerator here in Houston. That was the first time I was coming into this before I launched Headway. And I realized, I talked to the mentor beside me because it was my first event. And unfortunately, that accelerator is no longer around. But I asked him, so what are your qualifications for a mentor? And he gave me his, and I gave him mine. And I realized, immediately popped in my mind, and he had great credentials, but it popped in my mind, depending on the startup and the mentor they get, even though the mentor may be fantastic, it may not be the perfect fit. And a mentor, even myself, I come with one perspective, right? And so this mentor lottery wasn't good. So over the past 13 years, I've gotten the involvement of at least a couple hundred people, because I needed to make sure it wasn't just my thoughts, but it was the thoughts of countless investors, business professionals, startups that have failed and startups that have succeeded, and marketing professionals and customers. I needed to make sure I engaged with them and brought all this information, knowledge, perspective into what I built with behind this methodology. It creates predictable founder outputs, less stagnation and dropout mid-program, faster traction of progress against the cohort, and higher mentor leverage, less reteaching and fundamentals. So when we bring in mentors to speak and other accelerators that have used our program, it's pretty good because the mentors use our information and they speak on it. And that's really good because now there's a standard that the mentor needs to keep, but then at the same time, they're able to go and expound on from their experience. So I like the standard there because the standard is kept, then they can speak based on their own life experience. And then, we got these outcomes that are repeatable. It builds investor trust. And it's very interesting when I tell investors what we're doing. It's almost the first thing they tell me is send me startups then, because they understand the pain point on their end. And then your team spends less time patching and guessing, which can be very, very challenging.
And
So
then we have 5 minutes left. Wes, just letting you know.
good. I am just about done here. Let's build your next investable cohort. If you need us, we're here for the accelerators. With Headway, we definitely want your ecosystem expertise and our investment readiness framework. Mentors and staff have more time for you as an accelerator to focus on high value activities, which I know it's very challenging because I've been part of the accelerators where the mentors and staff are hyper focused on a few and then others get left out just because every startup comes in with different strengths, weaknesses, so on and so forth. And then we can help with the transformation of mindset, aligned teams, scalable business models, and then more startups per cohort get funded. Plus, when we know that startups have been validated through our methodology, we're always eager and willing to introduce them to our VCs and angel partners. Any questions?
And you can put your questions in the chat or come off mute if you'd like. If not, you could also email us. We do have our information here on this slide. You could email Wes or myself, and we could book a call. We love brainstorming, so just reach out. We won't bite. All right. Now, go for it, Michael.
If you can read his question.
Okay. Go for it. I'm having.
Okay, so Michael says, "Hey Wes, so
Oh, okay.
they are. Is that correct?" Yes. And I'm not sure what you mean by vocal, but I'm going to assume in regards to providing a lot of feedback to Headway and interested in our startups. Yes. Why? Yeah, I've had thousands of conversations with VCs, and more so in the beginning. Let's say 8, 9 years ago, it was to learn, right? It wasn't to pitch, it was to learn. And that was very, very key. But if you're able to unmute, yes. Okay, I know. Okay, Michael, I know who he is. Yes. So yeah, when I started Fruition Tech Labs, two things. Houston was very early, so uh, we didn't have many investors here, and all the investors were interested in the oil and gas. And so that's taken a huge transition over the past 10 years or so. I think more importantly, still VCs and angels are still very, very few in Texas. So the majority of my partners are outside of Texas. Even though I have some here in Austin, Houston, and San Antonio, the majority of these investors invest outside of Texas. So we've brought in a lot of VCs and investors, and there's a reason why they want to invest in Texas. Can't get into detail, but it's really good reasons. Nothing crazy. But back then, it was very difficult, and for many, many reasons. Houston and Texas. Houston is a predominantly oil and gas, and so the investors weren't any interested in anything outside of oil and gas. And great to hear from you, Michael. It's been a minute.
Hi, Wes. Can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, I can.
It is so great. I've been following you off and on, and will follow you closely. It's really good to see you again and see you're doing so well. And so I just wanted to get really plugged in. I appreciate all this information. My wife and I just finished listening uh, to the meeting and everything, and we were really impressed. So thanks, and thanks for answering my question about VCs, because early on I was, you saved everyone, not just me, but everyone you were mentoring a whole lot of time, and we're just so and just gave really practical information. So I can't thank you enough for that. And thanks again for the podcast. Really appreciate it.
No worries. I'm glad I remembered you too. Lost my hair though. Anyone else, Jessica? Or were there any questions you had for me, Jessica?
No, I don't have any questions for you. But that concludes our webinar. So thank you all so much for joining us. And I'll show my face again. Thank you all for joining us. And please holler if you have any questions.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.
Bye.
Good, Michael. Good to hear from you. Many blessings.